All right, so today we're going to continue talking about checking accounts in our lesson number 1. This is our second section in lesson number 1. Yesterday we talked a little bit about the different types of ways that you can pay for items, whether you use a debit card or whether you pay for something online or by phone or whether you have to write a check. In this day and age, a lot of our checking accounts and the money is transferred electronically. You barely ever use a paper check anymore. However, there are going to be some times where you may need to or you choose to pay with a paper check. So I want you to be aware of the information that is going to be on every single check. So for you, I'd like you to grab your student guide and turn to page 8. So what is on a check? Every single check that you get will need to be filled out clearly and accurately. It needs to also be in permanent ink to avoid any opportunities to misinterpret that data or prevent fraud. So the date that the check was written, that's the first thing that you're going to see on every single check. And you'll also see the payee. That's number 2. So it says usually pay to the order of, and this is the person or the company receiving payment. So if you went to Walmart and you wanted to pay them with a check, you would write Walmart here. Or if you were writing a check to your friend, you could just put your friend's name here. The third thing that you're going to see on every single check is the amount of payment in numbers. So John Smith is paying XYZ retail store $150.50. So that number goes right over here in the box. Not only do you have to write this number out in numbers, but just in case it's not clear, checks also have the amount written out in words. So this is the total payment in words, 150, and whenever they do cents, they use a fraction. So 50 cents would be written 50 out of 100. It takes 100 pennies to make up a dollar, and so however many cents would go in that fraction, so 50 over 100. You can see that a lot of times people will add lines if there's free space. That is just so that nobody else can come in later and add more information. They can't add on to how much money you are going to pay to somebody, and they can't add on who this is going to be paid to. Number 5 is an area for a memo. That's pretty much a description of the payment. This is option, you don't have to fill this out, but John Smith paid $150.50. If he wants to know what he paid that money for, he can write in the memo. This was for a prom dress. Oh, how sweet. Number 6 is the payer signature. No check can be processed until the person who's writing this check signs it. In fact, I have made accidents before where I didn't sign my check and it got returned to me and I had to sign it, and it was a pretty big issue. So always make sure that you sign your check. Number 7, this is the routing number to identify the financial institution that holds the account funds. So every single bank has a different routing number. That is printed on there. You won't ever have to write it out. But this is kind of like your bank's identification number. Number 8 is your checking account number at your bank. So this number right here tells the bank which account to take the money out of and who to send it to from pay to the order. And the last thing is the checking number. Every time that you write a check, your checks need to be numbered. And this is also printed on the check up at this top corner. So this just helps you, this can help you keep track of how many checks you've written. It also makes sure that somebody's not trying to duplicate your checks and that it reduces fraud. So again, just always be sure that you're writing your check out in pen so nothing can be changed. And if you make a mistake, you need to just totally rewrite your check. In fact, you can see that this check on the screen says the word sample in there. If you make a mistake on a check, you have to write the words void across that check. Fill out a new one. Make sure that if you have a check registrar, that we'll get into, that kind of helps you keep track of the checks that you've written, you want to write void on that before you destroy it. So make sure that you know that this was a voided check, so that nobody else can get their hands on it and try and take money from you that they don't deserve. So in order for you to get comfortable using a check, we want to have Check Writing 101. We're going to practice how to write a check. So this might be a practice check. You would add in your student name, and usually that's going to be printed out for you. Pay to the order of a person, the amount in numbers, the amount in words. You can write on the memo what you're buying this for. You can have a signature and also add today's date. There's a whole bunch of different completed checks that I'm going to show you. This is for a person, they wrote today's date in. This is for Mayfair Apartments for $750. So they wrote it in numbers, they wrote it in words. This was for rent, and then there's the student signature. Here's another example. Again, it has the student's name, today's date, who they're paying this to, the American Red Cross, for $5. So this was $5 and no cents is what they wrote, N-O, or you can write 00. This was for a donation to the Red Cross, and then the student signed this. So here is your assignment. Look in your notebook to Activity 5.2, Check Writing 101. Your directions are to practice writing checks for the following purchases. Always use permanent ink to write a check. So when you do this, use permanent ink. That means not erasable ink. Don't use a pen. Don't use a colored pencil, or don't use a red pen. Don't use a colored pencil. You should stick to blue or black ink. Be sure that your handwriting is legible. In a real situation, you want to be sure that the bank can clearly read the check so that they take the correct amount from your account. Don't erase or cross out your errors. If you do make a mistake, print void across the check and then write out another check. So you'll find an example of a written check on page 8 that we've already gone over. So you're going to use your own name, your school name, and today's date to write checks for 3 transactions. So you're going to buy a pair of tickets for an upcoming school event with a check payable to your school. So that paid to the order of, that's where you would put your school name. And you're going to pay $42.50. There's also paid rent to Mayfair Apartments and contributing $5 to the American Red Cross. So these are the exact examples that you just saw on the screen previously. But now you're going to input your information. You're going to write it out as well. There's a couple just rules that you can follow. They give examples of how to write words. You don't need to use the word and after 1,000 or 100, so you don't have to do $505 or $750. You just write $750. So those rules right there will help you as you're writing your own checks. And right here, there are 3 checks for you. Be very careful as you're writing these out. I think I've also attached a separate copy just in case you have to write void over any of these. So there should be 2 pages there for you. And you can pause this video as you complete Activity 5.2. So now that you're done writing these checks, I just want to remind you that it's always important that you have to have the right amount of funds in your checking account. That way you have money available to make your payments. So the checking account, it's not like a credit card. So with a credit card, you could purchase and purchase and purchase and pay back whenever you felt like it to the credit card company. That's not the same thing with a checking account. Rather, you have to make sure that you have enough money and you put enough money into your accounts so that money is still available to pay on demand, whether that's a check or a debit card. This is what a deposit slip looks like. So if you ever fill out a deposit slip, you would input today's date, your name, and your address and your city and zip and date code, or city, state, and zip code. You'd also sign here. So it looks kind of weird. Today's date goes below. Customer name goes below, customer address goes below on the line below these words, and then you sign here. And when you go to the bank and you want to deposit some money, you use these little boxes over here. Every single box is for a different digit. And you can see there's this kind of thick gray line right here. These 2 spaces are for your change, and then you would start filling everything else in. So if I wanted to input or deposit $100, I would write 100. That means $100. If you have checks that you're adding, then you can total up another checks. Oftentimes deposit slips are two sides, so if you have other sides, if there's something written on the other side, you would total that. And you would use a subtotal. Another thing that you would use is your account number. And remember, your account number is this bottom number right here. So you could put your account number on, and then you would add up the cash check, the total from the other side, subtotal, less cash, and you would total that right up here. We're not going to really worry about less cash in this class. I think deposit slips are kind of becoming phased out. Most people might make a deposit at an ATM and the deposit ticket might not be needed, but it doesn't really matter. Every deposit requires you to designate the account receiving the funds down here and the amount when making deposit. So we're going to have another activity. It's activity 5.3, make the deposit, so you can practice filling out a deposit slip as well. So activity 5.3, make the deposit, it looks like this. Brianna received money for her birthday, so to stay on track for her savings goal, she wants to deposit all of the money into her savings account. That's something we didn't talk about, whether you're going to put your money into a checkings or savings account, except for $20 in spending. So we're going to fill out a slip to deposit a $35 check and a $50 bill into her savings account. And they've given you this savings account right here. This is her savings account. So you can go ahead and fill out today's date, customer name, customer address. You don't really have to do that. And you can sign here as well if you're going to actually receive cash from this deposit. If you read this, except for $20 from spending that I kind of just told you we wouldn't be worrying about, we are going to fix, and we're going to worry about that right now. So our slip, we are depositing $35 check. So that check would go on the second line, and it would be 35. You do need to fill in zeros for your cents as well. So it would be 35 and then 2 zeros. She also has a $50 bill. That's cash. So she's depositing $50 for cash. So 5000. And she wants to keep $20. So she just doesn't have that change right now. So she would actually put less cash in here, 2000. So cash, check, and the total from the other side, which we don't have to worry about, that is all going to be added together. So 35 and 50 would be added together for our subtotal. So that should give you $85.00. And that less cash, that means that we have to subtract. So you would take that 85, subtract 20, and that should give you 65 as a total that she is depositing into her savings account. I understand that I went over that pretty fast, so if you need to pause this and replay it just so that you can fill out the deposit slip, that's fine. About the endorsement, regardless of how you deposit a check, you have to endorse it first, which means sign your name on the back side behind the pay to order phrase. So this completes the transaction to transfer the money from the check writer to the person receiving. So if you're writing a check, you sign the front of the check, and if you're receiving money from a check, you would sign your name on the back. So here is Brianna's endorsement. If she were to flip over the check that she received, you'd see her name back there. I have one final assignment for you today. It's a little bit of reading and practicing more about check writing and deposit slips. So if you look in your notebook, you're going to see Money Basics. It's an introduction, and it's going to describe a little bit more about a checking account, how to open a checking account, and getting your checks. So what I'd like for you to do today is you can read through this, highlight which you believe is important. There's some things that you can try as well. There's a check for you that you can fill out. It has the information. You can fill it in on that check, just more practice. There's also some deposit slips that you can practice inputting your information to as well. That is all the time that we have for today. So when you finish reading through this packet, you are done for today. We will be talking more about checking accounts a little bit tomorrow, but that should probably be the end of learning about checking accounts.